My name is Keith Nelson. I will be talking a little bit about the comparative hopology of hand and half swords, specifically looking at the katana, or the Japanese hand and half sword, and a medieval longsword, which is also a hand and half sword. I can use it with one hand. I can use it with two hands. As far as what these weapons are, they're swords. Swords are meant to kill people. That's about as simple as it gets, right? You don't go out and chop down a tree with this. Axes are really good at that. Swords suck at it, okay? They're sharp and pointy because I can stick people with them. They're not sharp and pointy so I can dig a trench to put seeds into. They're there to be killing weapons. That having been said, that's why there are martial arts to approach them. And what we're going to talk about today, and I'm just going to give a little presentation. What I have studied is I've studied a style of more modern Japanese swordsmanship called Tayamaru. Tayamaru Bato Do, Tayamaru Bato Jutsu, Tayamaru Iaido. These are all different terms, all for the same thing. And the style that I studied is underneath Nakamura sensei. And that incorporates something else called Nakamura-ru Bato Do. And that's a style incorporating drawing and cutting and attacking with the sword, mainly from a standing position because it was taught to Japanese military academy and formulated for the Japanese military academy in about 1929. Not very ancient, right? If it's less than 100 years old, really we can't even call it ancient. It's considered a modern Budo. It's a Gendai Budo. It's something that's come about after the samurai passed on. Swords are a secondary weapon on the battlefield, all battlefields. Or they're used to point out that you're an officer and rally your troops, at which point in time you get shot or otherwise targeted. Next, please, Bjorn. Japanese sword. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of different types. Chokuto, which is straight, single-edged, one hand, very early on, 400 to 800 CE. After that, it sort of transitions to Itachi, which is a quite curved, generally worn blade down rather than blade up. Let's see, I'll utilize my katana for this. This would be Itachi wear. It would be suspended from the belt, usually by two strings, and held down. Why? Because I'm a cavalryman. I'm on a horse. I don't need to worry about it banging around. It's supposed to be there banging around. Why? Because this is an easier draw. Okay? Katana. This is a civilian use, really. Civilian and for an era where cavalry was less important. There it's worn blade up, thrust through a belt, and carried around your waist. Okay? One-handed, two-handed use, just as Itachi would be. Infantry and civilian sword. Really, for about the last 400 years or so, it's a civilian sword. Okay, from 1600 onwards, it's purely civilian. You know, military used it, sure, but you know, used it for putting down rebellions or used it for rebelling. Those are your two options. And frankly, let's be realistic. Matchlocks in the hands of peasants beat out swords in the hands of well-trained men, every time. Wakizashi is a single-handed short sword, also used by Japanese and forming part of the paired swords that would be worn by a samurai thrust to the same side of the belt as the daisho. Okay? This is a very short wakizashi, but still a wakizashi. You can see here there's multiple methodology for laying. You had solid, hard steel throughout all of it. You had a soft steel that had a sandwich of hard steel around it and also forming the edge. You notice the one consistent thing here? What's on the edge of each one of these? The hard steel. Why? Because cutting someone with soft steel works, but not very well. What's another consistent thing? On most of these, you've got soft steel sitting for a pretty significant part, or medium soft steel somewhere in there sitting for a pretty significant part, and a lot of times across the back or in the core. Why is that? Because soft steel does things like bend. It gives you some spring. We happily have nice things like spring steel, which is this is made out of. Actually, this is probably 5160, something like that, which is both hard enough and soft enough to wiggle around, right? Wiggling is great, especially when it returns to true. Not so nice when it bends and stays bent. That's what happens when your whole blade is made out of soft steel. When the whole blade's made out of hard steel, sometimes what happens is it cracks and breaks. I've got a old Wakizashi blade up here that people can look at after I finish the presentation, and you can see some of the cracks on it. I think there's one little chip out of the blade too, but it's held up pretty well. What about sword weights? People will say swords weigh 10, 30, 20 pounds. Good Lord, I'd have a steel bar an inch around and 6 feet long. Actually bigger than that if I remember correctly. Weights are 2 to 4 pounds. Why? I have to be able to use it. You can't say medieval people were short and small of stature compared to us, and by God, they could wield 20-pound weapons. No, okay? Japanese swords cover a similar weight range. You have to be able to use it. You're a fighting person, you're not going to settle for something unless there's a reason for it, like you got to smash through armor, in which case, I'll take the 8 pounds worth of halberd, poleaxe, etc., nagamaki, that sort of thing, happily. Why? Because I'm going to cut through your armor. I'm okay with that. I need that weight. But I'm also not going to be wielding it in the same way. Students were another one. University students were banned from carrying swords in numerous university towns because of brawling. And they thought it would be better if they just brawled with clubs and sticks and daggers rather than with actual swords. How about elegant swordsmanship? That is not medieval swordsmanship. It is fun to watch. It's not medieval swordsmanship. There are numerous European manuals that demonstrate styles and techniques. There are very basic and simple Japanese schools. I'll be discussing one of them. And there's no style of swordsmanship that is at all trained in any way that just relies upon hack your way through the person that's in your path. That is as simple as it gets, yes. But you know, if you want people to survive a little longer than that, you don't just teach that. Okay? All right, next. Supremacy is a sword. It wasn't the main weapon of the samurai, sort of. It's the one you can carry around. I didn't bring pole arms today, but it's a lot easier than carrying around a 6-foot long or 8-foot long or 12-foot long spear, or a 6 or 8-foot long naginata, or a pole axe, or anything else. Infantry use pole arms. Why? It keeps the guy further away. It's a force multiplier. Early battles were all horse archery, right? The Cuba no Michi. That's the earliest samurai. It's the way of the horse and bow. Yes?
Did you bring any bows?
I did not bring any bows. That is not part of this talk. Ask the library, maybe next time. And then finally, you know, large numbers of peasants armed with matchlock guns. That's what wins battles. Large numbers of peasants, matchlock guns. People who don't have to be trained and can just plow through everyone. Similar in medieval Europe. All right, Japanese versus European swordsmanship. The European ones are prettier, don't worry about that. That happens. You'll note 2 guys in armor, what are they doing? They're doing this with their swords. Why? Swords suck at getting through armor. If I do this, I now have something I can stab into weak parts. I now have something I can stick into an eye slot with some accuracy. Trying to do that like this is much harder than trying to do it like this. I get up close, I wrestle with you, and I stab you with a pointy dagger that is now in my hand. Or I hit you with the axe I've just created with my sword. That's European fully armored fighting with swords. Japanese, similar, they tended to target very specific sites. You target up through here because the helmet didn't fully cover. You target the inside of the arms because that's where your lacings were. You could cut more readily there. Target the legs because that's a vulnerable spot. All right, next please. Or, can't be too hard, right? You just hit him with a sharp bit. That's really all swordsmanship is. Toyamaru kata ipponmei. This is out of a book that I have up here by Nakamura sensei. So begin, Toyamaru kata ipponmei. This is solo kata. My first move is going to be, might start here, I'm going to slide up. My hand's going to be here, I'm tucking my thumb over the top here. Why would I do that? Great question. grab and pull the sword. Excellent. Now, gently pull the sword. There we go. That's bad for me. I want to protect myself. That's why. So, thumb comes over the sword. My first movement is going to be reach here. I roll everything over. You'll notice I'm going to come follow along here. I cut up, boom. Comes here. This comes around, boom. If I'd stepped correctly, I'd be better off. And I cut. From there, I come forward. Snap it out in order to get it. This is called, it's called chibruli. People say, oh, you're throwing the blood off the blade. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're setting yourself up in a formal way to cover the person that's on the ground in front of you. Because from here, I can react to them. Okay. So, putting it away, and then back up. Boom. Next, please, Bjorn. Tiamu kata gohome. That's why. Two ways I learned for, I'll do the first way because I'm more used to it. And that is, comes out bato, which is draw. And you might stand here like this. And then, yato. It's 3 cuts moving forward, and up, and out. And then you'd walk back. It's nothing complex. The thought is you're carving your way through a group of people. Next, please. And then Kuma Touch. This is done against somebody attacking with a diagonal attack. My movement would be, I've already drawn. Okay. My first move is going to be, as they come, I'm going to step to the outside and block sideways as their blade comes in. This is going to come up and around, and I'm going to cut to their head, to their neck. I'll move back, we'll reset, and we can go from there. That's it. It's a very simple technique. Next, please, B. And then yonhome. Same thing again. He's going to cut downwards. I'm going to come here. I'm going to step out here, moving it over so the back and side of the blade is facing outwards towards where that sword's coming. This is going to cut around, and I'm going to cut the other side of the neck. Step back, and reset. Okay? Next, please, B. If we have time, we'll get through some of those. But I mainly wanted to demonstrate them a little bit. Real quick, I'm not going to show this first. What I'm going to show first is actually this. This is one of Fiore's plays that looks very similar in some ways to a technique that you might see from Tayamaru. It's one of the few from the draw. And the way this works is somebody comes up to me as I'm walking around town with my sword, because I just hold it in my hand, or I might hold it in my hand here, or I might hold it in my hand like this and walk around. They're going to come up. I'm going to block here, because they come up with a dagger or a sword. Doesn't really matter either one. It's an overhead attack. Block here, hit them with the end of the scabbard.